Welcome back, Wannabes and Creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build and sustain a creative business. And today on the show, we're going to dig deep into anthologies with my friend, Terry Cronin. I was introduced to Terry through another friend of mine who writes the Headlocked comic books, Michael Kingston, who I will be having on the show very soon. I promise you that. Terry has a book on Kickstarter now called The Healing, which is an anthology of 10 different stories. And I thought it would be really interesting, since I have a book called Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, The Terrible Twos, coming to Kickstarter on March 3rd, if we could dig deep on anthologies, the process of creating anthologies, and really what it takes to make an anthology great. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you do, head on over to thecompletecreative.com and check out all of our courses. And if you want to see the book that I'm talking about this whole episode, then go to CthulhuIsHardToSpell.com and check it out today. The new book, The Terrible Twos, is the second in the series, and it's 38 stories from even more amazing creators, including Paul Jenkins, Ray Anthony Height, and a whole lot more, dealing with the gods and monsters of the Lovecraft universe. If you love Lovecraft or just want to see the kind of anthologies that I put together, I recommend heading on over and checking it out. All right, now that that's done, let's get on with the show. Take it away, Terry. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
Well, I am certainly passionate about comic books, and I've been passionate about comic books since I was a little kid, so it's a lifelong passion.
Awesome. And you have a really interesting story on how you got into comics. You were telling me off the air. Could you relive that sort of transition for your career into comic books for me? Because I found it really interesting.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I studied filmmaking in college, and after I graduated, I made some independent films, and most of these were independent horror movies. And probably the biggest one was called Under the Bridge, about a troll living under the bridge who was killing homeless people. And it went to a lot of different film festivals, and me and my friends who worked on this film went to a lot of them and found some of these festivals very lackluster and not as glamorous as we thought they should be. And so we had this idea that we would have a film festival in our hometown of Melbourne, Florida, and we would make it a glamorous event, and we'd also make it a fundraiser for charity. And so that's something that we started in 1999, and it just kind of brings our community together, and lots of people come to see the movies, and the filmmakers really enjoy it because it's a venue where they're assured there's going to be a big crowd of people to watch their movies. So it's a lot of fun that way. But the thing that was kind of important was, at one time I got a call from a guy who ran a print shop, and he wanted to donate the printing of the program for the film festival to us. And he was super generous, super nice. And we did that. And when I went over to his print shop to look at the program with him, he had these incredible books of flowers and orchids and full color printing. And I was like, boy, these are beautiful. Have you ever thought about printing comic books? And he looked at me and he said, I've always dreamed of doing it. And that kind of got us together with the idea of making a comic book together. And we ended up making a comic book called Students of the Unusual, which is a horror anthology. And there were 6 stories in every issue. And we had a modicum of success as an independent comic creator.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting how those connections develop. I find that when I just put a ton of good energy and like make something really good and share it with people, the what comes back is always unexpected, but always has some of that magical quality that it sounds like you had with finding this partnership.
You're absolutely right, Russell. So we started off making this festival with very good intentions to help the community, and end up that it opened some doors for us and brought us into the comic book world.
And do you still have the festival?
Yes, we're in our 22nd year this year.
That's amazing. Keeping anything going for that long is quite commendable. So I want to talk about anthologies, but a lot of people that listen to this show are also filmmakers. So in your experience, and a lot of them are going to be making independent films or have made independent films. What what really makes a film stand out when they're applying to a festival like yours?
Well, I have like a little bit of advice that I try to share with everyone is to tell your story very quickly. All right, whether it's a comedy, a horror story, a romance, or even a tearjerker, you want to tell it quickly, make an emotional impact in less than 5 minutes. If you can do that in less than 5 minutes, I think you could go to every festival in the country, because programmers want to include filmmakers, but they have a very hard time including 25 and 30-minute opuses, So if you can tell a short film very quickly, you're going to get into a lot of festivals. And then you also, as a filmmaker, may get jobs in commercial work, because if you can tell a powerful story very quickly, you could also probably tell a powerful story in a commercial.
It's so interesting because I also tell that same advice to people when they're trying to get into anthologies or when they're trying to get work at a company is everyone wants to do an 8 or 15 page story, but it's very hard to have a 15-page story and make enough room. But if you can tell a really good 2 or 4 page story, you're probably going to get in, because especially if it's good, obviously, but if you can tell especially a good 2-page story, I almost always will include that, because what is the harm of putting 2 more pages into a book? You're almost always short of a signature by a couple of pages, or somebody drops out. So having that extra 2 pages is always helpful, whereas I cannot just program put in or accept a bunch of 8, 12, 20-page stories.
Well, it's so true. And when we were making Students of the Unusual, we would have 6 stories in every issue. And I can tell you that something would happen almost every issue. Somebody would have a problem. One of the artists couldn't get their art on time, or something could happen. So we always had a couple stories that we couldn't promise people that we'd get them in, but we ended up getting them in because there was always an issue, So you have like a time crunch sometimes when you're publishing.
Right, absolutely, and I'm always looking for somebody to try out who's new, also. And it's really hard for me to give 8 pages, or the highest number of our anthology is now 8 pages, because that's what we have found for our audience is sort of the max attention span that they can listen that they can deliver without kind of interrupting the flow of the book. But I can't give an 8-page story to a new person. I'm not comfortable unless you have had some success telling stories, to just blindly say yes to 8 pages. But I can kind of blindly say no to 2 pages. And if you get your 2 pages in and they're a good 2 pages, maybe you can get 8 pages the next time. Or you can take those 2 pages into it and show it to another person. But if you are in 5 anthologies, I never ask you how many pages were in that anthology. Maybe I should ask how many pages you had in an anthology. But I never. I've had a bunch of stories that are just 1 page or 2 pages, but it doesn't matter, because I'm in that anthology and I can list it in the credits that I have. And the more credits you have, the beefier your resume looks, and the easier chance people have to insert you into their anthology, maybe for a bigger piece.
And it's certainly, I think, a remarkable skill, or maybe a gift, to be able to tell a memorable story in 1 or 2 pages. If you can get an emotional impact that quickly, that's a real gift.
Yeah, it's something that, for me personally, it took me forever. I spent a long time writing full comics or full novels, and the last thing that I was able to develop really was the ability to tell these short stories. And it was only when I started doing my own anthologies that I started to see, when I got 100, 200 pages of other people's work, I kind of see, and I started reading other anthologies and seeing how they do their turns and when they get into the story, because I think this is one of the big things with people needing to tell long stories is they get in too early. So I tend to, if I'm doing a 2-page scene, it has to be the literal last scene of 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 like a book, but it has to make sense in and of itself as well.
Right, right. And of course, everybody's attention span is getting shorter. So I think that's why maybe anthologies are going to do better in the future, you know?
Well, I think that so when you're a young creator, it really helps to put together an anthology. And I mean young, not in age, but in like experience level. Because it sort of coalesces a group of people, sort of like you have your troupe that you can that you can go through the universe with, and you can all promote this anthology together. It helps. It helps all of you out. It's a low commitment thing. You know, everyone does 5-6 pages, and you all have then 30 pages or 50 pages at the beginning, and you know, it's you don't have to commit to doing a full arc or a full issue. I saw this with there's a comic book store called The Comic Bug, and their first thing was these like sketchy bug anthologies, or these woman creator anthologies, and they did like 2 or 3 of them, and they went from you know, not really putting out a lot of their own work to now all of them have their own books, because they all kind of went from, wow, this is the feeling that I have having a published work. Well, this is going to give me the energy to keep going. And the minute that people start saying, wow, I read your piece and I really liked it, it sort of gives you the motivation to do something bigger and more complex.
Well, Russell, you're absolutely right. And the thing that you didn't touch on, but I know it's in the back of your mind, is that in this age of crowdfunding, when you start off with an anthology, you have a crowd or a troupe, you said, of people who are working on a project together. And so you're already starting with a crowd, you know?
Right, exactly. It's a built-in. I mean, both of the Cthulhu anthologies have 70 creators that are involved in it. That's 70 people that I can hopefully rely on to push the book. But even if only half of them help push the book, that's a whole heck of a lot more than I normally have to push one of my graphic novels.
Right. And so many people on Kickstarter or Indiegogo are doing it all themselves, and I applaud them. You know, I must be close to having a nervous breakdown when you're doing it. But if you have this team, you know, a big team working with you, it definitely is helpful.
Yeah, especially if you can bring together people who are all in the same genre anyway of work, their own fandoms, and those fandom and the genre that you're planning to continue on with your career. Because the first book that I did, I was not really a young creator anymore, but the first anthology that I put together, the Monsters and Other Scary Shit book, was 30. It was an invite-only anthology, and we created. It was all creators who had some sort of little fandom or career or nascent career doing something relating to monsters. And when that hit, that $27,000, 600 plus backers, suddenly I was able to fund my next book way easier, because they had the book, they saw the next book, and that sort of perpetuated it. So when you're a mid-career, you're trying to break into the next level. I also think anthologies are a great way to do that, for specifically the reason that you're talking about. Maybe it's not coalescing that troupe initially, but it's like solidifying a fan base from all of these disparate sources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, horror fans are really motivated. You know, horror fans get really pumped up, and if you can get them marching to your beat, to the beat of your drum, that's a wonderful thing. And it can be like, I don't know if you've ever been to any horror conventions or just see the energy in horror fans. It's just one of the best fandoms.
I totally agree. I go to a couple of horror shows, and I am shocked at the level of enthusiasm all of the time. Every time I go, like, I do a bunch of shows in the same convention center, and every time I do a horror show there, it's like 5 times bigger than any other show that I do in that convention center.
I'll bet your book's pretty popular with them too.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that was all very intentional. So I think we should probably get into, we'll talk about the anthology. We kind of glazed into why an anthology is important, but I do want to talk about exactly like the process. But for me, when I did the anthology, I was having some success. I was doing, I was able to, I've been doing it full time for about a year and a half. It was pretty. It was a struggle, though. It was a real struggle to do like 40 shows a year and have that big break. And so my big break came with anthologies, and this sort of monster anthology. It had some horror in it, but also cute stories and funny stories and silly stories, and that coalesced my sort of ambition moving forward. It told me the kind of books that I was going to do, the kind of conventions that I was going to. Horror conventions, people eat up the Lovecraft book and the Monsters and Other Scary Shit book, and the other books too, but especially those books, because it's all sort of now coalesced under a singular umbrella.
That's fantastic. I think that there's a lot of things to learn from doing an anthology. When I started out doing Students of the Unusual, we had 6 stories in every issue, and that meant 6 different artists, 6 different writers. I wrote the majority of the stories, but I always had other people helping me as well. But one of the things I think I mentioned was that every month there was an issue with an artist, so you have all these people working on these stories, and then there could be an issue like a family member died or someone got sick or whatever like that. And it just made me appreciate what goes into producing a single issue on a monthly basis. These artists really have to have an incredible workload to get these done. And to get these done in a timely manner. Some people don't realize all the work that goes into making a comic book.
Absolutely. And I think that that having that insight into it not only gives you a perspective, but it also kind of hardens you because you're working with so many artists at the same time,
right,
as opposed to when you do a graphic novel. I did at most 2 graphic novels at any one time. You're working with 2 artists, so you have to kind of understand their workflow. When you're sending out a call to 6 artists every month or 70 artists to do this thing, you have to work with all of them and all of their styles and somehow figure out a way to make it all work.
Absolutely, and it's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of logistics and kind of juggling a lot of plates at the same time.
Absolutely. So how long did your first anthology run?
It ran for 2 years, and thankfully we were picked up by Diamond, and we were distributed by Diamond, and they talked me into going bi-monthly. Thank God. Otherwise, I think I would have had a nervous breakdown. And ultimately, they allowed me to do special issues after we had completed our first year. So we went to a special issue format, but it was really interesting, and it gave me a lot of respect for what the big houses do, how they're able to print so many books on a monthly basis is really an achievement.
Yeah, and when was this? What time frame was this that you were doing?
This was 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, things have changed a lot with Diamond since in that ensuing 10 years, especially
Absolutely.
when it comes to getting an independent book even into their system if you don't have a bunch of monthlies.
Yeah, we were very blessed. I think it was really based on the gifts of our artists that we had involved in the project. It just looked really professional from the get-go, and I think they recognized that immediately, and that was a huge boon. I had no idea how tough it was to get distributed by Diamond, and I only learned later how lucky we were.
Well, you have your new book, The Healing. The thing that really I was impressed by was the creative teams that you have involved. Like, there's some really heavy hitting people. Did that start all the way back with your first anthology, or did you sort of grow into better? I don't want to say better, but better, more accomplished artists over time.
Well, when I was first starting out, I think a lot of people didn't believe I was real. So, I'd reach out to real pros and everything, and they were very dismissive of me, and I don't mean that in an impolite manner. I just think they didn't believe it was real. So it was a matter of I found very talented people who were in artist alleys or who were on the internet showing off their their art, and I got them involved. But I didn't have any real named people. But a lot of them have gone on to become quite famous, and that was a boon. But they definitely got to show their stripes in our Students of the Unusual. But to get back to the healing, one of the dreams of what's going on there, and I just give you some inside baseball kind of thing, is that I've always dreamed of writing a superhero story, and I don't think I'm ever going to get a chance from the big two. I don't think I'm going to be invited to write Batman or anything like that. I have a tremendous Batman story in my head, but I don't think I'll ever be invited to do that. But I wanted to write a superhero story, and I collected a lot of independent voices like yours and the people I've met at the cons and everything who had the same ideas. They really wanted to write a superhero story, and a lot of people think that that's the wrong direction to go because you're not going to make it. You can't compete with the big guys. But my idea was, let's get some independent voices and we'll team them up with some really artistic legends, people who've done this, people who have a fan base, and we'll each tell a chapter of this new superhero team, and it's going to look really, really professional, but it's going to give them an opportunity to kind of spread their wings in the superhero world and do it with people who've drawn these superheroes. I mean, I can't believe some of the talent we have on this book.
Yeah, me either. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the talent that you were? I think it will inform the rest of the conversation that we're going to have.
Well, sure. I think some of the people that are involved are Barry Kitson, who drew. He's drawn just about everything, but I think he first came on my radar with Justice League and Legion. He's been drawing things for a long time. Incredible talent. But he wrote a book with Mark Waid called Empire that was unbelievable. And so he's involved. We also have Alex Saviuk, who drew Venom and Spider-Man. We have Val Merrick, who was the artist who co-created Howard the Duck. We have Larry Watts, who works on Army of Darkness, and we have I'm forgetting people because I don't have it right here in front of me, but I do not mean to miss anybody on this thing. The people who've stepped up are it's crazy. Like Alan Bellman, who drew Captain America in the 40s during World War II. He has joined us and has sent a pin up for us to use as a stretch goal. It's just amazing. All the people that are involved.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard-hitting list of creators. Was this invite only? This was invite only, right?
Well, what do you mean by that?
So you you reached out to the creators to work on. It wasn't open submissions or anything like that.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, there's two basic ways to do an anthology. One is open submissions, which is what Cthulhu is hard to spell and some others have. The other is invite only, which is you're reaching out to the creators and you're trying to get them involved, or you're reaching out to friends of yours or something like that. And there's no right or wrong way. They're just very different strategies that you would take.
Absolutely. Yeah. So no, it was not open. It was I was kind of like being like the editor in chief and trying to put people together and link people together in a way that I thought there would be good synergy. And one of the ones that I was very excited to do is to link Michael Kingston of Headlock Comic with Barry Kitson. And I just for some reason thought the Kingston Kitson chapter sounded like it would roll together nicely.
Well, that's how I know you from Michael's. So I'm very excited to read that story. Can you talk a little bit about how you went about sort of that pairing? Because it's a delicate balance finding the right creator to work with the right artist and make sure that their voices mesh and match up. Did you wait until you had a script from the creator, or did you do that earlier?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. First off, we had this idea, all right? And I basically told people that I needed a chapter on with certain plot points, and I asked them to write it. So the first thing that was done was I went to different writers, and I have 10 different writers involved. So 10 writers, actually 11, because Jeff Kaufman co-wrote with Russ Rollins, which is kind of neat. And so each of them wrote the chapter. And once they completed the chapter, I said to them, who is your dream artist? Who would you like to work with more than anything in the world? And of course, a lot of people throw out names that were just incredibly inapproachable. But I got a list of like 10 artists from each of them. And I worked my way through those lists and asked these people. And I think just every single one, I was able to get a dream artist for them. And that was kind of the thrill of the healing, was to kind of, make it so that we could get the very best of what their dream was.
Yeah, it can be so intimidating to reach out to these artists or creators who have had such long and storied careers. Do you have any advice for people as to like the process for doing that?
Well, obviously, manners and being polite is important. If you have a friend of a friend who can introduce you, sometimes that helps and makes it seem like you're real. I again, when I first started out, a lot of people didn't think I was real. And I got that kind of, dismissed because they didn't know that I had a track record. So I do have a track record, and I produce very professional comic books, very professional looking comic books. And but I do think that it has to be more of a network thing. Russell, you have a network. You have a huge network of people who know you. I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for like knowing Michael and me knowing Michael. And those are the things. The people thing is so important. So if you have, friends who can introduce you to someone, it makes a big difference.
You said a couple of things that I think are worth noting. The first is that before you reached out to these people, you had a history and a track record of making work that was professional level. And so you could always go back and show them that work, or at least you had a leg to stand on when you went to them in the first place, because, it was one professional reaching out to another professional. But the second thing is that is that I also had the same problem with the Cthulhu book. In fact, even when I did the first Cthulhu book, I was I felt like when I would reach out to people, I would get the brush off, even though my first book had raised $27,000, and I was doing the shows, and I was going out again. People were like, "Well, you did it once, but like, can you really like do this?" And I really didn't feel comfortable and have my sea legs under me throughout the whole process of that first Cthulhu book. And for the second book, I actually hired an editor, a well-respected editor who'd worked at Image and edited for everybody, so that at least it would not just give me the stability to be able to reach out or have her reach out, because like now I was using her network, because I have a lot of independent creators, but I don't know a lot of Marvel and DC artists. So she was able to reach out to those people. And also it gave me the ability to just watch how she interacted with the artists and make sure that the things that I was doing actually were like best practices. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it certainly does. And understanding sometimes the language of what goes into making a comic is part of it. If you don't know what's going on, you're going to sound like an amateur. And I guess the recommendation I have is that you want to start off and cut your teeth on a project. You mentioned that, a 1 or 2 page anthology. If you get an anthology, all of a sudden you're motivated because now you've done something, and your creative juices are now going, and you can see that you can do this stuff. And I do think that cutting your teeth on in any way in comics is great, even if it's one of these handmade, stapled together comic books that people often do at cons. On Artists Alley, I think anything that you can do to start getting into this, you just build upon it. You just build upon it.
Yeah, I've found people who did stapled zines. Found people from webcomics, but I always liked when I first started doing anthologies. I would actually just finish the piece. I would do the submission, and I would be like, I'm only going to do a 1-page or 2-page piece and I'm gonna, if I do it really well, and I just finish it and it's done, and all they have to do is say yes to that finished piece, it's going to make their life a lot easier and a lot harder for them to be like, I don't understand the vision of what you're going for, which is a big thing, especially when you're not a creator who has a style that is known, or that you can go back and show other previous work. It's hard for me as an editor, at least, to envision how a one page or one sentence pitch is going to get translated into a full 2, 4, 6, or 8 page comic.
Right. That's a very good point. So you just go ahead and write the whole thing rather than pitch it. Here's the story, right? Boom.
I actually have a hard time with doing the 1-sentence pitch. I've always had, I'm okay once it comes out and to do like the sizzle blurb and everything for it.
Right.
But like when you're pitching to an editor, they want to know like the beats of what's happening inside the story. They don't want it. It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to actually tell what the story is going to be with no surprises. And I have always found that when I write those, they're very boring. They're boring because it's just like it's an outline. And so if I can write it first, then I can better do the 1-page pitch. But more so, I want to have usually when I do this, I'm having I need an artist team already put together when I'm pitching the book. So I don't want to I don't want to commit the artist to something and then I send them a script and they don't like. So before I do the pitch, I like to have the script, send it to the artist and be like, thoughts? And when they are excited about it, then I can say, okay, I have this locked. This is the story. This is the artist. I know that he's she's going to be interested in this. And now I can go pitch. Because God, man, as an editor, sometimes I get stories back from people, and every once in a while I'll be like, oh my God, what did this artist get into?
Russell, you're talking about the craft, and I got a question for you. When you're writing a story, how do you begin? Do you have the ending already planned, or some writers will talk about how their characters end up writing themselves and they come to an ending that they didn't expect?
So it depends if I'm writing a long or a short piece. If I'm writing a short piece, I almost always start with whatever the twist is going to be at the end. I always want to make a twist at the end, even if it's just 1 page. So I did this 1-page story for this anthology called Death Saves, and I knew it was our favorite D&D deaths, basically. And I wanted to. I did a piece about a rogue who was dead, and they were talking sort of in their D&D group, like, like the wizard will just save me, and he's like, I'm not saving you. Like this, you told you not to do this thing. And this is like the 4th time you've died. Like you're done. You've got to create a new character, and that was like the twist on the standard tale. I did one in My Monster is Another Scary Shit anthology where this knight goes to save a monster, except the monster is just playing Go Fish with this princess, and the knight is very rude, and so the monster ends up smashing the knight eventually, but more out of rudeness than from anger, and the princess the whole time is like, I'm literally not in any peril. We're just playing cards. So I think with the short form piece, it's important to have something like that. I'm not 100% sure while it's good to have a twist in a longer piece, I don't think it's necessarily as important, at least and on every page, maybe in every issue, to build to something like that. But when you're writing a short piece, I always find that it's better to have some little twist or turn on it, because it's so hard to tell a new format story in a few pages. But it's a lot easier if you can say, what if I take this story and spin it so that everybody knows the story that I'm going to tell? But then when they get to the end, they're delighted by the fact that it's not quite that story.
I think that's exactly the way I try to do it too. I have, however, been, well, you write prose as well. You write a lot of fiction novels.
I do.
And, yeah, and sometimes I would get into writing a novel, and I have been overtaken by the character, and it has gone in a direction that I didn't envision when I started writing. And that's that magical, weird experience people talk about.
Yeah, that definitely happens in longer form prose. Because of the way that, also because of how I write, I'm like that to go back to that knight story. If I was to write that whole story out, it would probably be the knight, doing battle, like chasing, like trying to get to this cave, and then the last scene, which would maybe the last scene of the graphic novel, is what I'm telling. So it's hard for me to get lost in the story like I do with prose, or I actually enjoy doing with prose, because the end is kind of all I have. All I'm doing theoretically is I'm cutting off the first 95% of the story and just telling that like very little bit. Or I'm cutting a slice in the middle of the story, which might be the Act 2 turn. So I do feel that because of that, I have to be a lot more controlled with what I'm doing in anthology pieces. But I'm writing a novel right now, and I'm like, I was telling my wife last night, I have no idea who the bad guy is in this book. I'm 50,000 words into this book. I have no idea who the big bad is. I know who the little bads have been, but that they have to like fight. But, I thought the big bad was going to be one person, and then one of the main characters killed them in like the first third of the book. And I'm like, so I've been writing for the last 30,000 words, hoping that a big bad idea will coagulate in my brain. And it's just today, maybe today, theoretically, maybe what I just wrote before I got on this call with you, which may have been like the break that I've been waiting for the last 20,000 words because I went back and I killed. What ended up happening was, in the beginning of the book, the one of the main characters knows that this one guy has been plotting against her, but this one demon has been plotting against her. But the main character is like very much like no nonsense. Like she would never let that person. She would just kill that person like immediately, because she's very powerful. The demon's less powerful. Like there would be no chance that the demon would survive. But for about 30,000 words, I was just letting this demon survive, despite the fact that like everybody knew that he was the bad guy. And like, so about a few days ago, I was like, I can't do this. Like he has to die. And I went back and I added, which I don't normally do, this scene where the main character, where like this big bad died. And so for the past, I don't know, since Wednesday, since like Monday, probably, I've been sitting there being like, well, I hope some cool idea presents itself before I finish this book. Cause then that's what I think you can do in long form. Yeah. That I would not recommend doing in a short form piece.
No. I think you have to kind of begin with the twist or begin with the end and know where you're going in a short thing. One of the things about the healing project that we're working on is that I gave all the writers plot points to hit through the story, and you could take it in any direction you wanted for your chapter, but there were certain plot points that you had to hit. And I tell you, that is so interesting, because when you're working with these different writers, they come at it from such a totally different point of view. it's shocking. I read it and I say, oh my God, I never would have come at it that way or thought of it that way. And it's a pleasant surprise. It's exciting.
Yeah, but so this is one of the reasons why I think that we go back to doing short pieces when you're unknown, or doing the script and sending the script in early is really helpful, because while it's delightful when something comes back that's better, it's also fraught with fear while you're waiting for that thing to know if it's good or not.
Right. That's true. That's true.
I get a pitch. So how the pitches work for me is I get a pitch. If you're accepted, I have deadlines that you have to meet. But if you don't send me a thing, all I really care about is that I get the piece by the deadline. I have a kill fee, and in order to qualify for the kill fee, you have to like hit all of the deadlines. And if you blow one, you've now blown your kill fee. But you still can submit the story, and if it's good, it gets in. If it doesn't, it doesn't get in. And that is a very, 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 very precarious situation that I place myself in every year.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty stressful, actually.
So the more, and all they have is a little slug line. Like I have the artwork of the artist. I have a bio maybe for the creator. And then I have a slug line and maybe some concept art. And I just have to like cross my fingers and hope that, I've got a 160-page book by the end of it. And so having the script in, at least I can be like, I see how this one paragraph now translates to the script. And now I can at least envision what is going to happen when you have art in there. And I'll tell you that it's a lot easier for me to approve somebody who's been in my books before or who I've read before. We have Paul Jenkins in the new book, and like I didn't see anything from him until he submitted his final page. I don't even remember if he put like a summary on his thing. I was just like, Paul Jenkins is in. I don't care. Partially because of his name, but partially because I just knew that it would be good.
He's a great guy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was really happy with that. We got Ray Anthony Height for the book too, and the same thing. It's like he I think did put up the submission, but I looked at his name and I was like, I know that it's going to be good. I know, and not just him, but there's a lot of creators that I just know are going to be good, and I almost don't have to even see the slug line and just be like, well, whatever you're going to make, I know it's going to be on time and good, so go for it. But then there's a lot of people who are on the fence. Maybe they're friends of mine who have never made a story before, and I'm like, I want to approve them, and some of them I do approve, but like I just have no clue if like they're going to be able to translate. And then there are people that I know will translate. And then there are people that actually, in this anthology, I had something that was rejected. And then the guy finished it anyway. And then I looked at it when it's done, and I was like, well, that's very good. Can I have that now, please?
Now that's funny. That's funny. How do you go from giving them a rejection to then saying, hey, I like it? It's like taking a little egg on your face or something.
I mean, it was taking a little egg on my face, but it was a similar concept to somebody. Like, there's a lot of Lovecraft gods and monsters, and I try not to use too many of the same ones, especially if they're very iconic. And this one happened to use a character that another creator had used. But when I saw
Russell, go ahead and try and pronounce it for me. Go ahead. What was the character?
I can't. It'll give it away. So it's actually not a hard to do one. There are some really hard Lovecraft gods. This was not a particularly hard one.
Yeah.
So when I saw the script from the one creator, I knew that it wasn't too similar. And then, I mean, I saw the final story, and I was like, well, the blurb did not do this justice. Sometimes an idea is not revolutionary, but the way that it's presented is like just very clean and precise and shows a vision that the log line doesn't. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, you get it. You hint at something too that I've found in comic books in particular, is that you can write a story. I'm not an artist. I'm a writer, and you can write a story, and then when the artist envisions it and returns the art to you, I can tell you, I mean, it's always such an exciting moment to actually see it and see it come to life with all the embellishments that they brought to the table. It's like I can't tell you what it. Well, but it's such an experience. I think that's probably the biggest experience in creating a comic that just keeps you going. More than anything in the world, is to see it actually come to life.
Absolutely. I think it's I've done film and I've done a bunch of stuff, and the going from the script to the pencils is kind of like the only moment that I just have pure joy and wonder at the creation process, because they've taken these small amount of words and they've made a thing from it that is better than I ever imagined.
Thank you for saying that. It's so true. Better than you imagine. It always is better than you imagine. And it's just like, it's mind blowing to me. And so I love that synergy. I love that moment when that happens. It just keeps you going. And I think that's probably, besides, there's a joy of people reading your material. I think when people read your comic and tell you they enjoyed it, that's probably the biggest thrill. But the second biggest thrill is that creative spark and seeing it come to life.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And sometimes I just thought of something to go back to the last thing we're talking about is sometimes the artist portfolio does not do them justice. In fact, a lot of time the artist portfolio does not do them justice as like what the story's going to be. Maybe the portfolio is old, or maybe it doesn't have some sequential work, or maybe it seems to fall flat as to what we're looking for as far as stylistically goes. And then you see the final piece and you're like, well, this is so much better. And sometimes an artist will grow during that piece, because you always have this like level up, and you don't necessarily know when the level up is going to happen. You just keep doing work. And sometimes I have literally seen somebody's work, and then I've seen the literal next piece that they do. And it might be for an anthology I am or some other piece. And I was like, oh my God, like this is night and day.
Oh, it's so true. So true. But I don't know. Sometimes it's that portfolio is why you take the risk, and if the portfolio isn't thrilling you, why did you say yes,
Right. Well, that is why this person, I forget the exact reason, but it was some combination of, the pitch didn't have that twist. It was just like a clean, well-done story, and you need those in an anthology. As much as I say make a twist for everything, or like that's how I like to do it,
right?
There's something to be said for just a clean, well-told story that has a well-defined beginning, middle, end, and is very satisfying. And those are the kind of stories that tend not to stand out when you're looking through submissions, but are incredibly important when you're putting together the book at the end, because you don't want 50 stories that all have like a crazy twist ending. You need to pace and move, and you need to like take a shock and then like bring it down and move it up like a mixtape. And if everything that you do is just twist after twist after twist after twist after twist, people are going to grow to expect that twist.
Right.
And so having it's very hard. This is why like I find the submission process is like the hardest part of this whole thing, because you want to accept, for me, I want to accept a wide range of tones and styles. And I also want some just very clean stories that have beginning, middles, and ends that are not going to surprise you, that are just going to like enrapture you for a few pages. And those are the ones that you have to take a gamble on a lot, because those are the ones I tend to not to hire people that I haven't worked with before, because it's so easy to make them boring and bland, and there's a real skill in having a story with that doesn't have that super compelling twist pitch, and delivering something that is going to be wholly satisfying. It's quite a bit easier to deliver something that has a twist at the end, and at least you're like, well, like, even if it's not great, it's got this cool twist.
Well, I love that analogy you just made, Russell. The idea of a mixtape. You're almost, when you're running an anthology, you're almost like a DJ making a mixtape that's very well curated music for a party. For a party that you're putting on, that people, entertainment party that you're putting on.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are different ways to make an anthology, but my favorites always revolve around the editor's sense of placement and feel, and how they want me to come into the anthology, when they want me to turn, what they want me to leave with. And I think that as an editor, that's what I look for in an anthology, which is, for me, the place in comics or in prose where the editor can really shine. When you're doing a big long piece, you're helping and you're making a lot of adjustments to the writing or to the art, but most of it is driven by the writer and the artist if you're working in comics. But with an anthology, you get 5, 10, 20, in the case of the Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, 38 stories, and you have a vision for how you lay those stories out. As long as they're good stories, really, that is the difference between a great anthology, a good anthology, and one that falls completely flat.
Let's hope nothing falls completely flat. Right.
Well, so I've read anthologies where you have, three a very similar story back to back to back to back to back, similar page, similar cadence, similar rhythm, and after the third one of those, people start glazing over and they start to lose interest in the thing. So while they might like the art, they might start flipping faster. So there's a real art to putting it all together, especially when you're doing something like me, who's not. This is very different from what you're doing, because you have a much tighter vision with plot points, and you're hiring the artist, and it's an overall story. For me, I'm having basically 38 disparate pieces or 35 disparate pieces, and I have to find the right submissions to come in, and then when they're done, move them around in a way that is satisfying, in a way that an anthology, in the way you're talking about, is obviously quite a bit different in that respect.
Yeah, I'm not sure that anybody has attempted the kind of anthology that I'm doing per se. I think the big comic companies do this, but they usually do it with issues. They don't do it with little plot points through it. I've seen it. I guess I've seen it in some of their 100-page spectaculars and stuff like that. But as an indie, this is, I think, breaking new ground. I think one of the things about doing it as a Kickstarter, this is my first Kickstarter. I know you've had tremendous Kickstarter experience, but one of the things that I really am finding very enjoyable is this idea of stretch goals. And as people continue to back us, and we keep hitting these stretch goals, we are unlocking things that you wouldn't do this normally, but we unlocked another chapter into the story, drawn by a fantastic artist named God, I'm blanking my names here. Jack Herbert. Jack Herbert does Superman, Wonder Woman. He's does incredible work, and he did an extra chapter for us and it's just amazing, these things. And we unlocked these stretch goals as we continue to go on. Did you have a lot of stretch goals on your Cthulhu anthology?
I don't do stretch goals in the way that you're talking about. The way that I do stretch goals is I create digital bundles with friends of mine and other books that I have found, and people agree to help me give them away. So people, when we get to certain numbers, people get extra books. They don't usually get I because I already do hardcover and all of the these super high end stuff. There's not a lot of place for me to go without adding pages to books, and I really don't like adding pages to books because I want to have it all locked before the Kickstarter starts.
Right.
So
makes you nervous.
It makes me, well, it also allows me within 2 weeks of the campaign ending, that book is off to print. And if you're turning around books as fast as, every couple of months, which is like I'd try and do a Kickstarter 2 to 3 times a year, I need that speed to get the next book ready. I can't be waiting for 6 months for the final pages to come back or any of that stuff. So for me, like, the book is locked except for the special thanks page at least a month before the campaign ends. Or at least a month before the campaign begins, so that I can send them off to ARC teams. And then my job is to compile all of these really cool bonuses. Maybe it's extra digital prints, or maybe it's extra digital books, or maybe it's on a very rare occasion it might be like a print that I add into the book, but I don't like doing that because then you can't ship media mail.
Right.
So I'm very judicious about the stretch goals that I offer. What I do instead is I take all of those bonuses and I offer them throughout the campaign as we hit certain milestones or during certain times. So I'll give like an early bird rewards for a few books if you back at the beginning, and then in week 2 I'll unlock a couple of other ones for everyone who backed during week 2, and then I'll unlock more in week 3. So that gives me a chance to hit up my audience almost every day with something brand new, either opening and closing, and create mini campaigns during my big. My big campaign.
That's fantastic. That's ingenious. That's great.
And I also go for quite a bit more than most people do. So I do, our next campaign is going to be $30,000. The next one's going to be somewhere between $23,000 and $25,000 for Ichabod. So I have to make the whole campaign, and I have to assume that I'm not going to get there until the end, and make the middle of the campaign interesting. So I designed the whole campaign so that, there's something cool on week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. And then, and then it gives me a chance to reach out to people while we're still funding without being like, we're at 50%, please help me now.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I think that's fantastic. That's a great way to do it. I guess I was a little overconfident. I had Jack do that chapter before we were funded because it makes me nervous to not have things done while we're doing the Kickstarter. So
that is the thing that can halt you. I have a friend of mine who has been delayed I have many friends of mine who've been delayed because of the stretch goals that they added to the books. And in fact, my first campaign, we added like 20 pages to the book and had some people drawn into the book, and it went on for 4 months. I think it went on, and we're printing in China, and they have a Chinese New Year, so it went on. We ended the campaign in like the beginning of October. We finally sent the books in the books in to the middle of January or something, right as China was shutting down for like a month. And then when they started back up, they there was all of this, that there was a backlog basically. And so we didn't get those books until May of the following year. Now, for me, it didn't matter back then as much because I was only doing that one book. But it meant that I went to like 5 shows without this book, and I had to like do other print runs with different covers and such. So since then, I actually delivered the next 4 campaigns within a month of them ending. And then I've just had like this process now where every time the book's done, within 2 weeks after the Kickstarter's done, it goes to the printer, because then I get the money back, the money in my account. It goes to the printer, and after that, the book comes, and then I fulfill it, and then I'm on to the next one. So let us, we're reaching the end. We've actually just about to cross an hour here. So I want to spend the last segment talking about the healing. I know we talked a little bit about it, but this is your chance to dig deep. Tell us why it's important. Tell us why it's special. Tell us why we should support it.
Well, it's really our love letter to the superhero genre. We've got 10 writer-artist teams telling a chapter each about this adventure of 5 unusual heroes. The artists involved include Sergio Cariello, Frank Fosco, Drew Geraci, Jack Herbert, Ben Herrera, Barry Kitson, Val Merrick, Lee Oakes, David Williams, and Larry Watts. And the writers are Mike Barron, Gary Scott Beatty, Mike Broder, James Hudnall, who actually has recently passed away, so this is his last work. James is a prolific comic writer. Jeff Kaufman, Michael Kingston, Pat Martin, Russ Rollins, Stephen Shea, and John Taddeo. So what's
the story?
The story is really about a cult that is taking over the world. All right. And this cult makes everyone kind of speak the same way, see the same way, do everything the same way. And it's an insidious thing. And it doesn't really make sense why these people are turning into this, are joining this cult and turning into kind of automatons. And it explains in the story how this happens, why this happens. And it is linked inextricably with why these people got their superpowers. So it's an odd story. It's an unusual story, but I do think that if you love superheroes as much as I do, you're going to enjoy it.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. So let us go to the last thing that we need to do, which is most of my people here that are listening are artists or writers or driving in their car, or they're doing something where they're not paying 100% attention. And so this is where I tell them to wake up and pay attention for just a couple of minutes while you impart your best piece of advice. It could be something you've said already or something new that you haven't said yet. And then tell us where we can find you and the healing, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Well, one time when I was in high school, me and my friends tried to make a short movie. And we were filming it, and we were doing some dialogue, and we had some people on the set watching what was going on. And my mother couldn't understand what we were doing, and she just kept yelling out, "Do something, do something, do something." Well, it ended up being in the background of the film we made. You could hear my mother yelling out, "Do something." We didn't want her in the movie. We didn't want her saying that. But it sticks in my mind to do something. If you're passionate about being creative, you've got to do something. Don't just say, "I'm gonna do it." Do something. Get it done. Whether it's a short film, whether it's a story, whether it's a short story. We talked a lot about doing really short stories or short films. Anything. Just do something and get it done, and it will just snowball. Things will build upon itself, and then you'll be doing the things that you're passionate about. Hope that was
awesome. I love it. And where can we find you and your work?
You can find me at 3boysproductions.com. That's the number 3boysproductions.com. You can also go to our Kickstarter for the healing. It's active now through the month of February. We really want you to take a look at it. I think the guys who helped me made that website fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much for stopping by today. It was great talking with you.
Russell, thank you, and thank you for all you're doing. Talk to you soon.
So that was Terry Cronin, mastermind behind the Healing Kickstarter, which is live now. Head on over and check it out. I think it's going to be really, really cool. And if you want to get a sample of our new anthology, Cthulhu is Hard to Spell, head on over to cthulhuishardtospell.com. Or check out thecompletecreative.com, where we actually have a lot of resources in the podcast archives to help you plan your own anthology. And I've even created a course about it, which might or might not, but definitely will be available during the campaign that begins on March 3rd. And that's it for me. Please make sure to rate, subscribe, and review this podcast. It's the best way to get us seen by more people. Have a great day.